Hello, folks. Welcome back to Non-Toxic Environments. This is Andy Pace. Today we have a very special guest with us, Paula Baker-Laporte, fellow in the AIA, building biologist, somebody I've known for many years now. I had a chance to serve with her on the board of directors of the Building Biology Institute. Paula is a real fixture in the healthy building, healthy design industry, and she happens to have a new copy of her, or a new version of her book on the market right now. And so we wanted to have her come on the show, talk about prescriptions for a healthy house. I think it's her fourth edition of the book now been updated, and I hope you enjoy the show. Hello, folks. Welcome back to Non-Toxic Environments. And as I was saying, we have a special guest on today's show, a friend in the industry, an icon in the industry. And, well, you don't want to listen to me talk about this anymore. So let me introduce you to Paula Baker-Laporte. Paula, thank you so much for being here today.
Well, thanks so much for having me here.
So Jay and I were talking about this episode. Actually, we've been talking about this for a couple of weeks. And it seems like for he and I in this, we've both been in this business for about 30 years. You know, your name is synonymous with natural, healthy building. A lot of our listeners are new into the industry. They're new. They're younger folks looking to buy or build their first home. And I think it's going to be important for them to hear your story, your background, and why they need to buy your book. And so please give us a little background.
Okay, well, just around the same time you were getting into this is when I really got into it too. In the early 80s, I lived in a home that made me sick, and I didn't know what was wrong with me. None of my doctors that I tried over the years knew what was wrong with me. And finally, I was doing a home for Dr. Erica Elliott. She was also experiencing symptoms and didn't know what was wrong with her, because they don't train architects and they don't train doctors in considering the environment. And, as an architect, I never learned about any connection between our built environment and our health, as insane as that sounds. So we discovered, after she discovered what was wrong with her, we knew what was wrong with me. I had multiple chemical sensitivities from living in a brand new home with lots of chemicals in it. And once we put the pieces together, it was so obvious to me. And then the question was, well, I thought I was going to have to give up being an architect, because how can I be on job sites with all these chemicals if I react so badly?
Right.
And then the big gift in all of this was I realized, well, if it's making me ill, it must be making other people ill too. And are there ways to do this better? So that was the beginning of the search. And I have to say that once I found out about AFM products, I knew that it was possible. And then we took it from there. It's been a long research project.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that. Jay, my story. My story is actually very similar to Paula's in that I was on a job site supplying a water-based epoxy coating, and I had workers rush to the hospital because of inhalation complications. And I had to search around the country to find a way to finish the job, and I found AFM. Mm-hmm. And so very first product line I've ever found, and you as well. And it seems like it was almost like an epiphany. Like, if one company can make these materials that are healthier for the occupants, why don't all companies do this? Why doesn't our industry just completely switch over? And it's amazing that we've both been at it for so long, and it still feels like we're pushing a rock uphill sometimes.
Yeah.
I think the fact that your story, Paula, Andy's, your story, and thousands of other stories, these health experience that we have can propel us in a direction that we may not even have conceived of. And certainly this was Nestor's story. I'm sure you spoke to Nestor, Paula, in the early days of AFM, when Nestor was being affected, as you were, by being an architect and being in a built environment. Nestor was, making products that were not healthy products. And of course, it was affecting his health and it was affecting the health of his employees. And so that got him launched on this idea of, I've got to find a better way to do this, or literally people are going to start dying. And so that's how the brand was developed. Back in the 90s, the whole concept of living or working in a healthy home or office is like, what, revolutionary, right? I mean, no one thought about that. You just mentioned that, you weren't thinking of that in your practice.
No.
And I guess if we were to survey people right now, probably to a person, they'd say, live in a healthy home. Oh, heck yeah. I mean, that's exactly what I want to do. But back then, as you recognize, there was no guidance really, because it was kind of a new concept.
That's right.
And so, I mean, what you published your first edition in 1998, was it 98? The edition 1 came out?
I think it was 97 or
97.
Right around there.
Okay.
And I do want to credit when I researched anything there was this before the days of the internet that was out there, John Bauer was
Yes.
first pioneer to really write a comprehensive book on how to do this. And of course, we've all found our own paths from there on, and things have evolved and all of that, but I'm sure give him credit. And he was someone who had a very chemically sensitive wife, and he did all this research just to create a home that she could live in. So
right. And John, unfortunately is one of those pioneers with the arrow in his back, because he got as much as he helped people in his book, with his other writings, with his consulting, so forth, he was blamed a lot by people who weren't fixed, let's say, weren't healed by living in one of his homes, until I think we finally realized, and John was certainly a mentor of mine, we realized that, chemical sensitivity is not just it's not a singular definition for everybody. It seems like everybody with chemical sensitivity has a different definition, or even better yet, a different threshold of what the problems exist that can cause issues within the body. And unfortunately, people took they took it out on John, which is unfortunate. I mean, he's such a nice man. I still talk to him every once in a while, but you are right. He is just he started it all, and I'm glad you also give credit to him.
Oh, sure. That was that, and I'm trying to remember the gentleman's first name. His last name was Good. He was an architect, and he wrote it was a very skinny book, but it was an architectural language. But here's what you need to do. Of course, our answers have changed. We've learned so much over the years. But it was a start. And one of the things anyone working in this arena knows, that every single human is biologically an individual. And I'm sure you've seen too, as I have, is that healing happens. Your body wants to heal.
Right.
And no one thing, is going to do it alone. If you've been injured in some way by the environment, it's great to live in a healthy environment, but there's so much more that has to heal. And so we're one piece of the puzzle.
I think it's okay now for people to admit that they have issues around sensitivity. Back in the day, if you were mentioning sensitivity, it was kind of a foreign idea. And a lot of folks struggling with EI were kind of pushed around by the medical profession. Physicians at the time weren't able to understand, that mind-body connection. And so, and as all three of us know, you're in a discussion with someone who has EI, and there's a lot of fear that's a part of the conversation until they feel more comfortable with the concepts. And now, of course, with your books, Paula, people can have a real deep dive into how to live healthfully. I think that's the whole point. Whether you're chemically sensitive or not, people, when they tell me they're chemically sensitive, I go, well, welcome to my club. because in a way we're all sensitive.
Yes.
Our immune systems work wonderfully for us, and many times we can evade the problems, but everyone's got a threshold, and if you tip yourself over, as who's our teacher? What's her name? Doris Rapp. Dr. Rapp said, "You're a barrel." Right? You're a barrel. And if your barrel fills up too high, it tips over, and then you start to struggle with all of those exposures.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. And there's a lot more filling those barrels now. There's a lot that's gotten better, and there's a lot that's become more challenging. I don't know what you're seeing, but for me, people are contacting me with different kinds of illnesses and different reasons for doing this. So often now, it's because they have children who are born with allergies or born on a spectrum and need special care. And we didn't have electromagnetic issues like we do now. It used to be very easy. You just needed to know how to wire the home correctly. And that was plenty to know compared to what was going on in houses. And I've seen just an incredible rise in mold sensitivity. And that has to do with the way we build homes, especially in this country. So it goes deep.
Very deep. One of the things I wanted to talk about was when you got started in architecture, you were in commercial, weren't you?
No, I've always, in school, of course, you're everything, but
right, of course.
I'm a Cancer, and home is my thing. So
Okay.
I've always been residential.
Great. I was going to say that for me, I started in this business trying to sell these products commercial, and I found out really fast that the homeowners, consumers were the ones driving the entire market. And so I find that now, 30 years later, I have homeowners asking for things, saying, yes, I'll pay for this. Of course, I'll pay for that. And still on the commercial side, when we try to get involved in projects, it always comes down to, well, if we have a client that's interested in that sort of thing, I suppose we can look at using those types of materials or systems. It's amazing to me how on a commercial side, they're still resisting the application of healthier materials. They're, of course, 100% behind eco-friendly or green, but they fail to see the disconnect between that and what's friendly to the human occupant. But for homeowners, it's like right there.
Yes. Yeah. I think both in the home market and the commercial market, if the public was educated to know what to ask for, then everything would change. There's so many people, Whole Foods. If you go into Whole Foods, it's crowded, and yet most of the people don't know in there that having healthier homes is an option. Having the equivalent of organic, locally grown food as a home space is an option for them. And if they did, they would jump on it. If they knew they didn't already have that, for starters,
right,
that it could be a lot better. So yeah, I think it's education.
That's interesting. It's been education for 30 years. It's still education today. It's not, you would think at some point it would get easier, but as the industry changes, it almost makes it more difficult to get people in the right direction, because they muddy the waters by talking about things that are supposedly eco-friendly and green. And then people get lulled into the sense of security, thinking that, oh, well, they're doing the right thing for me. And they really aren't. It's that whole adage about VOCs and how if you just reduce the VOCs, you'll have better indoor air quality. Well, what about all these other chemicals that are not classified as VOCs, but are still highly dangerous, and nobody regulates them, nobody measures for them. And yet people think that, well, I bought zero VOC paint, so I'm good. And so it's your job as an architect, as a consultant, a material expert, all of that. Although you've been doing it for so long, it really has to be almost getting more difficult because of how the industry is pushing back.
It's gotten more difficult in some ways with greenwash. And in some ways, it's gotten much better. There are now, if you want to find out what's in something, it's easier than ever. It's still, we still know very little about all of the chemicals we use, of course.
Right.
But of the ones that we know are harmful, it's very much easier to find out if it's in something that we're recommending. So the tools have gotten much sharper.
Correct.
Then, as I said, there's other issues like mold and electromagnetic issues that we're just scratching the surface now. So I think most people, I mean, VOC, most people have heard the term now. 30 years ago, it was an unknown term.
Right.
So
yeah, that is true.
We're adding to the acronym world the idea of hazardous air pollutants as well, which is another side of the equation. You know, what was I thinking? Well, I want to just go back, Andy, when talking about commercial, and there's kind of obstacles there. You think when a commercial project, when you start to talk about these products, you think what happens is immediately they think that everything's going to push them out of budget? Is that a thought they probably are having? Oh, you want me to do it that way? It's going to be way too over budget. We won't be able to afford it. You think that's one of the obstacles, and then just access, being able not to go to local suppliers or their supply chain and get it to where they're used to. I was just wondering, just off subject a little bit.
Well, I think that it's because of a couple of things. Number one, most builders don't look at materials from a standpoint of quality. They look at materials at a standpoint of price and availability.
Okay.
And so when the owner says, is it going to cost me more to build healthy? The answer always is, well, it depends on what quality level your builder or the architectural team is drawing at. If you are drawing everything up based upon material specs derived from Home Depot and Lowe's, yes, it's going to cost you more. If you are planning on building with quality materials, it should not cost any more to build healthy. But then what gets tacked onto that, of course, is the builder's desire to pay for his time learning things, that 30% what if factor. In case something goes wrong, I better make sure my time is taken care of. And I'm sure, Paula, you see this on your projects.
Sure. A builder who's on board is the biggest gift that any owner can have, in conjunction with an architect who's on board,
right,
with the mission.
Right.
And they know that the toxic stuff is going to last. They're not going to get a call back. And new territory, it's a little frightening, but I always try and prime the owner. What you want is a builder who's going to take responsibility for everything. If you're introducing a bunch of new materials, and this is what you want, you may be called upon to take some responsibility too. This is a team. This is a team effort. And when it isn't, you can't accomplish this well.
Right.
I try to explain to homeowners too, if people understood what their medical bills were going to be, or the loss of quality of life, there's no price you can put on it if they become ill. And the upward quality of life, if they build well, that's a very valuable investment for them. And I often find people think they need, someone will come in with the idea, I need a 3,000 square foot home. And maybe they don't need all that hallway. Maybe it could be designed better. Maybe they could do what they want with a beautiful, high quality 2,500 square feet. And then they have 500 square feet at X times to make the quality. Maybe they've got a $1,000 faucet, and there's often a $500 faucet with just as high quality that will do it. So there are many different ways that you can work with a budget. And if everyone isn't on board, then it's the non-toxic items where the finger points.
Of
that
course.
this is what threw it over budget. And I don't buy that.
Right.
Well, Paula,
Exactly.
you talk about in your book, you talk about the idea of sanctuary.
Hmm.
Can you expand upon that a little bit? Because I love that word sanctuary. That is such a
Yeah.
supportive word. So
Yeah.
what does that mean for you?
For me, it's beyond how, so everyone should live in a chemical-free home with electromagnetics taken care of, and it should be well designed according to the best building science so it doesn't get moldy. For me, what I've learned from building biology, I don't know if you discuss building biology much on this program, is that a home can be much more than just non-toxic. That's a low bar. The high bar is one where all of the other factors, in building biology, nature is the gold standard for healthy human environments. You can take every element. What are the colors in the building? I like to use that as an example. In nature, if you look at a leaf, there's not one color. There's 20 different shades and hues of green in that leaf. And indoors, we paint a wall, it's essentially one color. If we go a step further then and use natural pigments and plaster, or I'd like to use an example that fits into AFM, the difference between oiling a wooden floor or putting shellac on it, or an acrylic finish. It's deeper than skin deep besides the richer tones. And Jay, we've used your product, so I wanted to go there with this example. When you walk on a floor that's been oiled instead of had a plastic coating put on it, your foot is breathing in a different way and it feels different, reminiscent to how it feels in nature. So if you think of a home as really a sanctuary or a temple that just enhances all your senses, that's when it really gets interesting for me. And that's when it's really doing its highest purpose.
It's a very holistic concept for sure.
Yes.
And I would imagine that if you were to tell a client a room that needs to be sanctuary, it would have to be the bedroom.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
It's where we do our repair. It's our repair shop,
Mhm.
and it's where we spend a lot of time. So that's the most important room, of course.
Yeah, we spend as much time there as any room in the house. So, and
Mhm.
you're right. I love that. It's the repair shop. That is such a great way to phrase it. Well, it's just a wonderful way. So another thought that I saw there in the book, it was talking about, well, obviously, maybe let's talk a little bit about, this new challenge with EMF and what you advise when you're talking to your clients about how to manage this new challenge, which is basically kind of unregulated, right?
There's a lot going on there, and the first advice I give is to to work in conjunction with an electromagnetic specialist, because that's an ever-changing field and requires good instrumentation, etc. Again, basic specs for wiring the home properly and putting in hardwired computer terminals and all that has been standard for us for 30 years. But the kinds of problems we're seeing now with exterior forces, with variable speed motors, with all kinds of technologies, with Wi-Fi enabled appliances and all of that is much more complex, and it takes someone with specialized knowledge to work with the client. And if they're already very sensitive, it's a matter of life or death for some people, whether they can find that the degree of shelter that they need.
It can be it can be the last trigger in someone's tipping over.
Mm-hmm.
If they're on the edge of their sensitivity threshold, and this new electronic exposure just pushes that little bucket over, and then it becomes really complex, because then we've got that whole issue. So I guess on that note, how is that field evolving in terms of education? I mean, who are getting trained to be able to talk to someone about that? Is there something going on at the educational level now in architectural colleges or?
Oh, no, but the Building Biology Institute has always been at the forefront. And if you go onto their Find an Expert page, there are people who are now certified as electromagnetic radiation specialists.
There you
So
go.
that's a great starting point.
Yep. There you go.
Um,
You talk about also this idea of being able to ask questions. And I'm probably thinking more along if I were traveling someplace, I needed to go someplace, but I wanted to make sure wherever I was going to be safe. Do you have some kind of a list of questions you could ask someone on the phone about what's going on wherever you plan to set up shop for a while?
That's a hard one, isn't it? Traveling is very tricky. For me, with my particular brand of sensitivities, the first thing I want to know is if they're using scented products. Like, because if I go somewhere to spend a night and the bed sheets have been through some kind of smelly sheet fabric softener, that's it for me. I'm done. I'm fried. I'm toast the next day, whatever, because I will not. I would rather sleep in an outhouse.
Yeah.
So that's for me. For people who are electromagnetically sensitive, usually to find a place that's not Wi-Fi up the wazoo is very difficult, and I don't know how they're managing, frankly.
Yeah, you think the hospitality industry in general is kind of waking up a little bit?
They're in a funny way.
Yeah.
I've seen the whole health spa movement and staying at a hotel spa that has really blossomed, but a lot of, for example, I've seen places advertising healthy lighting, but it's all Wi-Fi enabled colors that change during the day to imitate nature. But if it's Wi-Fi enabled and you're Wi-Fi sensitive, that's not going to work.
Yeah.
And people want to be able to get away but stay in touch. So everything is wireless. Maybe there's a hardwired hotel out there. I'd like to know about it, because I don't do that well either.
I don't think so.
It's interesting. It's the unintended consequence of trying to do the right thing. At least that they think it's the right thing,
Right.
Making your life more convenient, making it easier. It's actually making our lives more dangerous.
Like banning the incandescent light is a perfect example.
Mhm.
And it was done for the purest of reasons, to reduce our energy consumption.
Mhm.
Like having motion, light sensors or sensors that turn the lights on, occupancy sensors.
Mhm.
That's great, except if you live in that kind of environment, you forget completely that there's these little switches on the wall called light switches, and it's your responsibility to shut them off. So,
Right.
yeah, we don't, that's a very serious thing to try to think through unintended consequences, but unintended means with the best of our efforts, they haven't been thought about. So.
Right. It makes me think of just the topic of regulations and building code and so forth. A lot of things have improved in our industry over the years because energy codes have gotten better, building codes have gotten better. Obviously, with energy efficiency taking the lead here, building code got better since the early 1900s after the Great Chicago Fire and changed our fire codes. But there are still codes on the books from back then that make it necessary for flame retardants in materials, specifically on a commercial level, but also in residential. They're just used because, well, that's what we use. This is what we've been doing for 100 years. I'm kind of curious to know your opinion on this. A lot of my clients will just in passing say, well, hopefully our regulations and our building codes will get better and things will improve. Yet, if you just look at history, for the most part, for human health concerns, regulations have just made things more difficult.
In many ways, well, first of all, sense of self-security. I've heard it said many times that if your builder's advertising that they build a code, it means they're one step ahead of the law, and that's it.
Mm-hmm.
Again, codes are well-intentioned. And many, codes have kept us from many house fires, used to take a lot of people's lives. But I'm really saddened by some of the energy codes because it's introduced so much foam into buildings as if there were no health consequences.
Right.
And foam has become, plastic foams have become synonymous with energy efficiency, which somehow has become synonymous with health wrongly.
Right.
So there's a big downside, of course.
Mm-hmm.
And I've had, some of the most regulated places are the hardest to introduce. For example, some block products that I like to use because they're hygroscopic, because they don't form mold, because they're a really good start to a healthy building. And some places are so regulated that it's difficult to use them there. So it's a downside.
Right. And so on that, then your process, when somebody contacts you and wants to hire you to design a healthy home, does it start with, where are you in the country? Because we have to take a look at what type of home can we build.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Well, we really divide our time now between doing architectural design and consulting with other architects and builders and homeowners around the country too. And there's certain parts of the country where you're simply not going to be able to introduce some of what I consider to be better, healthier ways to build. It's just, you might as well be from Mars proposing these things. And so I always remember the adage that any improvement is worthwhile and work with what we've got. Mm-hmm. But we don't design stick frame buildings anymore. We haven't for at least for 20 years. And simply that's very, it's only clients who are on the same page as us who we design buildings for.
Okay.
I wanted to ask you, since we're talking about different types of construction, what is your feeling about this infant construction using 3D printers to print homes?
Well, I'm someone who thought the internet was never going to catch on because everyone would have to have it. I learned from that experience not to predict. We've been hearing about this 3D printer and seeing little plastic objects come out, like we need more little plastic objects. But I did see a video of a kind of a souped up Adobe home being built that way. And heck, if it can build an earth structure, I'm all for it.
Yeah.
So I think that time will make us all liars if we predict.
Yeah, I think you're right. So this is the 4th edition of Prescriptions for a Healthy House.
It is.
Yes. And yes. If you could say one thing about what was the motivation for this 4th edition, what really said, let me get the pen out and rewrite this book one more time.
Well, the 3rd one was way out of date. That was from 2008.
Oh, okay. Mm-hmm.
And the industry's changed and we're always learning. Mm-hmm. And so my hope with the first book is, we'll publish, I was naive, we'll publish this book and we'll never have to do another one because everyone's going to adopt this. Mm-hmm. And I wanted to have something where when someone called me, not everyone can afford to hire us. I could say everything I know is in that book. If you're willing to read that book and absorb it, then you'll know everything we need for just the price of the book. What a great deal.
That is fabulous. And there is so much to know.
There is
so much to know. I mean, the phone calls and emails I'm sure you get as well as I get from people across all over the world. It seems after 30 years, I'm still learning just about from every customer that calls me. I'm still learning something new, something different, something I never thought of. And it's exciting. It's still exciting in this business, even after all this time. But to have, your knowledge in this publication is just fantastic for the industry.
Oh, thank you. It's this will be the last one. I'm getting old.
Don't say that. Just remember what you said.
Yeah, that's all right. They can call me both a liar and a fool if I write the fifth one.
You know what you're going to have to do? You're going to have to give me a list of all of the free books you're going to send out to the big construction firms. We'll send them a complimentary copy of Prescription's 4th edition. We'll get it to Turner and all those big guys and say, hey, you guys, get in the game here.
Let's put our head together on that list.
Okay. I'd like to do that.
And anyone out there who can't afford a consultant and can't afford to buy the book, tell your local library, because we always donate copies to libraries.
That's fantastic. So if someone wants to buy the book, how would they do that right now?
EcoNestArchitecture.com. And also on our homepage, we have a link to a free ebook that gives excerpts from the book and table of contents, etc., so someone can get an idea of what the book covers before investing.
That is
and it covers a lot, folks.
Yes.
There's a lot of information in there. It is valuable information. I encourage all the listeners to pick up a copy. We'll certainly have links in the show notes when this goes out. And if there's any last parting things for you to tell us, Paula, we're all ears.
Oh, how much time do I have?
As much time as you'd like.
I need a prompt. Oh, here's something, some advice is, it's, I tell every client, it's a lot about expectations too. It's difficult to get it perfect, but it's absolutely a no-brainer to get something that's better built than 99% out of what's built out there.
That's fantastic. I mean, that's really sums it up, which is don't strive for perfection, strive for just the best you can do, the best you can afford, or that you can tolerate and so forth. There's so many things that I think a lot of times homeowners will fail to start a project, start the process for fear that they're not going to be able to do it perfectly. And it turns into the situation where they're stuck where they're at instead of at least trying to make an improvement. Yeah,
I have to say, over the years, there's so much we don't know about the very how I think 7% of the chemicals that are man-made have complete health data on them. There's very little known, and there's problems with disclosure. But so that's very intimidating. But the good news is, when people carry through and do the best we know from start to finish, even I've had very, very sensitive clients who've been able to move right in. And so that should give courage and encouragement to anyone who's thinking of building a healthier home for themselves, or renovating, or doing something to improve their environment.
Fantastic.
Yeah, I would say to everyone, don't give up. Don't give up.
Exactly.
It can get a little rocky. The water can get a little rough, but if you stay the course, I think you'll find that was the thing to do. Paula, thank you for joining us. What a great interview. And yes, we'll have to get a list. We'll have to share a list and get some copies going out to some of these folks.
Great. That sounds really great.
I'll chip in for that, because the industry needs a really good education about this.
Right. Good.
All sounds great. Let's put our heads together.
Excellent. Okay. Paula, thank you so much. It's always a pleasure speaking with you. Appreciate you being here today.